and we're creating a framework of how Jewish history unfolds according to a specific and predictable pattern, which originated literally from preordained before Bereshit. And of course that pattern is the familiar pattern of Shabbos, which is 6 days a week of malacha, repair, action, restoration. The 39 malachos of Shabbos are not just malachos, but they actually represent a process of repairing the world, because the Mishkan is actually the dugma of the repaired world. The world post Adam Harishon fell into disrepair, and the Mishkan represents the fixed world, as will the Beis HaMikdash will be the redeemed world, as it were. So the 39 malachos of Shabbos, carrying this, that, makeh b'patish, finalizing a kli by hitting it, all these things are a lot more than they seem. But they actually represent actions that are symbolic of creating not only a physical structure, but of tikkun olam, of fixing the entire world. Okay, but that's not for right now. What I wanted to just use the metaphor that the Shabbos is actually not only it's not just a rest. It's not that you're resting. It's that you've achieved. You've taken care of all the things that are not present, and everything now is shalem. Everything now is whole. That's why we say Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. We've reached shlemut. Anything that was lacking, missing, not available, in disrepair, is all dealt with. And that is the process that Hashem wants us to go through. Hashem's looking for partners to do that in the world. And I think my main motivation in terms of giving these shiurim is that people should connect to the larger idea of where our world is going to, that we don't adrift. We're not drifting in a how shall I say, chaotic place, but that Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is following a course towards a destination. And that should give us a lot of chizuk and emunah, and that should also give us a little direction in terms of where we put our focus. Okay. So the principle is, of course, Masa Avos Siman Labanim. Whatever happened to our forefathers is what happens to us. So when we read the stories of Bereshis, they're not just stories at all, but they're actually a microcosm of everything that's going to unfold later. This the Vilna Gaon wrote extensively about in his writings, writings about Kabbalah, the Kabbalah of the Vilna Gaon, based on the Zohar and so on, is that whatever you see in the Torah is not that it happened, but that it is happening. It is what is going on in the world. I mentioned about the Frierdiker Lubavitcher Rebbe used to read the newspaper. He said, I'm going to read the newspaper. He was reading Parshas HaShavua. They said, what do you mean? You're reading the newspaper? He said, I'm going to find out what's going on in the world. Because this is what's going on in the world. If I read the Parsha, I know what's going on in the world. Okay. So what I want to do today is we spoke up until now about how the structure of the world, the spheros that Hashem created, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, etc., each represent one millennium of the world, right? In other words, the first 1,000 years was the millennium of Chesed. The second was the millennium of Gevurah, the third of Tiferes, okay? Which means that we are in which millennium? In this sixth day, so to speak, the Erev Shabbos day, represents the one right before Malchus, which is called Yesod. Yesod.
What happened to the other?
Okay, so let's go through it. The first millennium, which is relevant to Avram Avinu, the first 1,000 years of creation, really is a combination of Avram and Yitzchak. Avram, the first 1,000 years, which is Chesed, and the second 1,000 years is Gevurah, is Yitzchak, so to speak, and the third 1,000 years, in which Avram is already physically on the scene, creating his family, is known as the 1,000 years of Tiferes, which is Keneged Yaakov Avinu, which is the integrated Torah, meaning that Torah actually is being taught in the world. Up until that point, Torah wasn't known to the world, it wasn't revealed to the world. That revelation only came to the children of Avram Avinu, Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, and the Shvatim. That's what was going on in the world at that point. And then the world goes through its journey, the fourth millennium, which is part of the revelation of Torah. That's the unfolding of the period of the Jewish people in the land of Israel with the Malachim and the Beit Migdash, right, and going through that entire history. And that brings us to the very end of the second Bayit Sheni, at the end of the Bayit Sheni period, right, which takes us roughly to the year 240, which is the finalization of Torah. Okay, so what do you got? You got the first 2,000 years is Chesed and Gvura. The next, the third 1,000 years is Tiferes. The fourth millennium, which is the year 3,000 to the year 4,000, right, is Netzach. And then, right?
Third one is Tiferes.
Third one is Tiferes. Fourth is Netzach. Fifth is Hod. And sixth, that we're in the midst of, is called Yesod. And then Malchut is the Shabbos. Malchut begins the year 6,000. And actually early, because Shabbos always begins early. Question is how early. And, I guess that's how, how some of us are better at bringing Shabbos in earlier than others. Some of us are running to the last minute, right? And, you're still jumping out of the shower 2 seconds before candle lighting. But others are sitting and saying Tehillim at 12:30, you know what I mean?
How would you explain the fifth?
The fifth is Hod. The fifth millennium is the millennium of the deep gullus. And that was really sad. This was really a sad period in our history. It's the sad, but like everything else. In Judaism, nothing's always sad. Within the sad, there's always simcha. There's no such thing. But in terms of externally anyway, what it looked like was the year 240 to the year 1240, up until the period of the Ramban, which we were in Golus, first in Bavel and Rome, and later in Western Europe, Christianity. Not even much later, but starting with the year 312, pretty much. Pretty much that's the millennium of our exile within the lands of Edom, meaning Christianity, and Yishmael. Yishmael appears a little bit later in the year 622, but overall that's not so late into the millennium. It's only 400 years into the millennium. So from the year 600 to the year 1240, you're talking about Christian and Islamic domination of the world. But we consider it Mal Galut Edom, because the Christian world was where we were primarily and where we suffered the most. And where most of the action took place. Right? Where was the action? So you had, in the year 240 till about the year 1000, you had the big presence of the Jewish people still in the Middle East, right? You had the Gaonim, you had the period of the completion of the Talmud, right? Which is in Bavel, which is in Iraq. So basically the Jews were centered in Iraq. That was where we lived. And then it started to spread with the advent of Islam, starting in the year 622. Things started to spread westward. Why? Because the Arabs conquered the whole North Africa, all the way up to Spain and major parts of Spain in an instant, within a couple of years. It was a really remarkable thing. Up until that point, it was all the Roman Empire. It was all the Roman Empire. It was all the Byzantines, they called them. Oh, they found Byzantine coins, by the way, in Beit Shemesh. Did you know about on the way to Yerushalayim? Byzantine coins. What are Byzantine coins? That was that period of time, while the predominant Jewish life was in Bavel, right? And the Christians were here doing their thing. And those coins are from that period. It was a time of, it was hard, it was almost impossible to have Jewish life in Eretz Yisrael from the year 240 till the year 240 to 1240. There was Jewish life in Israel was minimal. Even whatever was built up under the Islam, when the Crusaders came in 1099, they took every Jew in Yerushalayim and they put them in a shul and burnt them alive. It was impossible. It was impossible to establish anything here. So that period of Hod was a period of a deep Christian exile, the worst, which starts to come to a close in the year 1240, at the dawn of the sixth day. The Christians start slowly their descent from power. Slowly, I would say. It took a long time. All right. So what I want to do, though, is today is to explain that within each millennium and the story that's playing out, it's always the same story within the Jewish people. And we read it again and again. Every year of every millennium, we read the story of Yosef and his brothers. And then we read the story, since it happened, the story of Purim. And we make a Leil HaSeder. And we tell the story of Mitzrayim. Again and again and again and again and again. Why? Because it's what's happening now. So I want to go into that a little bit. How is the story of Purim what's happening now, what needs to unfold now? So let's go a little bit more deeply into the Megillah, since we just went through Pesach, and we're going to see how it applies to where we're at in history, which is the Elef Hashishi, the 6th millennium. Okay, so let's go back to the Megillah. There's an interesting thing in the Megillah, at the very end of the Megillah, right? Mordechai comes out, it says here, Mordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech belevush malchus. He came out with royal garments, right? How many? There were 5 of them. Techeles, right? Which is turquoise. It's that color that we make, the talesim with, ideally. Chur, that's called, that's a white color, right? Ateres zahav, gold, golden coin. Remember that in the Mishkan, they wove golden threads into the fabric of the coverings of the Mishkan. This week's parsha, Yaacov Bakude. And also he had tachritz boots, a garment made out of fine linen. Linen is a plant, of course, and dye, and also purple. And Be'ir Shushan Sahala v'Samecha. Why did the? Okay, we have Techeles is 1, Chur 2, the Ateret Zahav Gdola is 3, Tachritz Butz is 4, and Argamon is 5. Tachritz Butz, which means a robe of fine linen.
And what was the last?
And a purple. That purple was probably wool dyed purple. So tcheles is that greenish, turquoise color, white, gold, linen. Now linen is like a gray, really, and then purple. And everybody was very happy. So the Mefarshim asked, the Gemara Megillah asks, why were there 5? Why did the Megillah's Esther enumerate for us 5 begadim? What's important about 5? You could have just said Mordechai went. Bilavush Malchus, Va'ir Shusan, that would have been good enough, right? I would have understood. Says the Gemara Megillah that there was a very specific reason here. What's that? Well, let's go back even further than that. Let's go back even further, which is what the secret of the garments of the Kohen Gadol. Again, these are echoes of things that even preceded it. So where were garments? Where were 5 garments found previously in the history of Klal Yisrael as being significant? Yosef gives Binyamin 5 garments. So that's what the Gemara says in Megillah. It says in Tet Zayin Amabet, it says that because Mordechai was a descendant of Binyamin, right, whose brother Yosef gave him 5 garments, as opposed to the 1 garment that he gave to all the other brothers. Therefore, Mordechai merits the 5 begadim of Malchus at this time. Now, the Chizkuni, and that's, I'll quote you the pasuk in Bereshit. The pasuk says, "Lukulam nasan leish chalifot smalot." U'lebinyamin nasan 300 kesef v'chamesh chalifot smolot. So not only did he get 5 garments, he also got 300 pieces of silver. Right. Not only that, but the Chizkuni adds as follows: when they were eating with Yosef before he revealed himself, this is what happened. It says, "Vayeshu lefanav habechor kebechor raso." This is now 2 prakim earlier, right? In Mem Gimel, Lamed Gimel, it says, remember the story that they sat down to eat with Yosef before they knew he was Yosef, and they were astonished because Yosef put them each in their proper place. So it says, "Vayishu lefanav habechor kebechor raso, v'hatzeir b'tzeiruso, vayitmahu ha'anashim Yisrael." They were shocked. "Vayisa masas me'es panav eleihem," and they look at the portions that they had in front of them. "Vaterev masas binyamin mimasas kulo." The portion that was given to Binyamin was chamesh yodos, was 5 times more. So he got 5 times as much stuff to eat or drink than anybody else. So the Chizkuni says, don't think that the 5 garments that he later gave after he revealed himself were not already foreshadowed in what the food portions or whatever was given to Yosef by Yosef to Binyamin prior to revealing himself. Says the Chizkuni, it's all the same thing. It's a foreshadowing. Just like that was 5, later it went from food to garments. And they drank, vayishtu, vayishkru, imo. Interesting. What does that sound like? Vayishtu, vayishkru. What is that reminiscent of? They drank and they got drunk.
Like the first.
Like Purim, right? Like the story of Purim. It was like a little bit of a Purim story. Hence, Chazal put together, that was a Purim story. Because in the Purim story, Mordechai, the descendant of Binyamin, will go through a similar experience. Again, underscoring the idea that in everything that we know, we already know everything. We just are going to re-experience it again and again and again, I guess until we get it right. Okay? Hashem keeps giving us the same chance. He says, it's not a different game. I'm not trying to confuse you. But I'm going to, it's like the merry-go-round goes around and around. You got to get the ring. One day we're going to get the ring. So what was going on over here? So the Gemara asks a very difficult question. It says, "Efshar davar shenitztayer bo oso tzadik yichashel bo." Didn't Yosef suffer from the fact that he got an extra portion than his other brothers? That he got, Yosef himself suffered, right? He got the ketones pasim, right? He got that special, and now he's doing the same thing all over again and reintroducing the same problem that the brothers should be jealous of Binyamin because Binyamin is getting 5 more portions and 5 more things of clothes and 300 things of silver. Oh, what are you doing here?
And Yosef did it again when he gave Yaacov gave the bracha, that he reversed his hands as well.
Yeah. Which caused, okay. And that's part of what Yosef was upset about. I mean, Yosef himself said, so what are you doing here? You're creating the same problem. The younger is going to be better than the older. Didn't we go through this already? So the Gemara says, Rava bar Machasya said in the name of Rav Chama bar Guria, in the name of Rav, who was one of the greatest of the rabbis of the Talmud, he says it like in this ironic way. On account of 2 selah coins worth of wool that Yaakov gave to Yosef, their jealousy grew, and our forefathers were forced to descend into bondage. Can you imagine how terrible that is for a lousy bit of fabric? Basically, that's what he's saying. For a handful of fabric, a worth of wool, 2 selah coins, was this worth it? So, Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes, Remez Ramazlo. This was a hint. She'asid ben latzeis vimenu b'chamisha levush malchus shenemar Mordechai yotza b'levush malchus. What is the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying this wasn't a gift that was just a favor to one brother or the other. This was a message for the future of something that had to happen, that was good for it to happen, that was part of our quote-unquote messianic process of moving forward Jewish history towards its destiny. This was a message, not a gift. And the message was, there's going to come a time where there's going to be a certain Jew from Binyamin, Ish Yamini, who's going to go out with these Levush Malchus. This is to give chizuk and strength to the Jewish people when they're going through this time and travail. So there was a secret message, a remez, that was being handed down to the Jewish people through Yosef that was meant to help them, not to hurt them. Help them by giving them chizuk and lessons and guidance and what to do. In other words, follow Binyamin. Follow this Binyamin. This guy has something very special. So what was Yosef really saying? He's saying, don't put Binyamin down like you put me down. Don't discount him because he's not one of the brothers of Leah or because he was born last. He has an important role to play because without him, without his descendants, i.e. Mordechai and Esther, there's not going to be a Jewish people. To underscore the fact that at certain points, certain parts of Klal Yisrael have to step forward and provide leadership. And it's not always the same parts.
Are you saying that Yosef actually told his brothers that?
I'm saying that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes, Remez Ramaz Lo. He gave a hint in saying, look, you have an important role to play in history because you better give this Masorah down to your children again and again and again, year after year, that there's a special role that Binyamin is meant to play. Now, by the way, that explains the selection of King Shaul altogether, who's the ancestor of Queen Esther, right? She was really a part of the royal family of Shaul HaMelech. Now, why was there a Shaul HaMelech? Let's go straight to David HaMelech. Who needs Shaul HaMelech?
Yeah.
Who needs him? Look at all the problems you read, you learn. Sefer Shmuel, how David suffered at the hand of Shaul, right? And what Yonatan went through, and the terrible, life that David had because he was nirdaf. He was being chased and almost put to death many, many times by Shaul and his army.
And his
Why?
children.
What?
And then his son.
Yeah. Why? Because the first stage of Jewish redemption must run through Binyamin. There's no other way. So when they first asked for a king, although the goal was Malchut Beit David, and this brings us back to the Ramban, who said, Lo Yosser Shevet mi Yehuda b'chokik ben Raglav ad ki yavo Shiloh. Remember we learned about the great debate in Barcelona. So the Christians want to say, that what that means is that the Jewish monarchy will end once Shiloh, once Yoshka comes, because that's when the Beis HaMikdash was more or less destroyed, and that's what they wanted to prove. Now we're going to find out what it really means. What the Torah really meant was something else completely. That there is going to be an alternative Malchut, but that Malchut is going to be the Malchut of Binyamin. And where was Shiloh? Ad ki yavo Shiloh. Shiloh was a place. That's right. So the correct reading of that is, and there's a beautiful piece. I don't know how much I can give over to you today, but I will try, explaining in depth what that interrelationship is between these two kingdoms. There's a sefer called Niflos Mitos HaMizborach, which is incredible depth into how everything in the Torah foreshadowed everything that was in the Navi. Forget later in history. And here's a great example, that the gift that was given to Binyamin by Yosef gave us a hint of what was going to happen in Megillus Esther. You understand? That's how it is. And this is an entire brilliant sefer that shows all of that. And he goes through, we're going to read it. We'll read a piece of it. But first let's get the basics down. The basic idea is that there's two Malchios within the Jewish people. And that's why there's two Mashiachs that we speak about. You understand? It's the same concept. Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben Yosef as a table setter for Mashiach ben David. Just as Shaul set the table for the Jewish monarchy and got it going, and then David came and perfected it. And really Shlomo was the one who perfected it. So our aim was to get to Shlomo and the Beis Hamikdash, but we had to go through a journey. And the journey is not an option. It's a prerequisite. It's like you want to get your degree, you got to take level Malchut 101 before you're going to take Malchut 501, you know? You're just not going to you just can't. We have to learn certain lessons. We have to go through certain experiences, and there are certain kochot, certain parts of Klal Yisrael that come to the center and take the center leadership role at that moment. And one of those examples was the leadership of Mordechai and Esther, which no one could have predicted. No one could have predicted. And much like Yosef, whoever thought that Esther was going to be a factor? Whoever thought? Who is she? What? All of a sudden, out of nowhere. That's the idea of Yosef. Just like the brothers didn't have any clue that the key to their entire survival was going to be Yosef in Mitzrayim. Yosef was off the charts. He was out of the news. He wasn't relevant anymore, or so they thought. It was all about them. It was all about the children of Leah. Oh no, you forgot something. That there's a piece here that is essential to your survival. Just like Yosef fed the Jewish people and was able to sustain them in Mitzrayim so that they would not be completely exterminated, so too Mordechai and Esther in Shushan Abira protected the Jewish people that they wouldn't be fully exterminated. And that's the idea. This is not news. This is just a reality. There is such a reality of the interrelationship between these two elements of Klal Yisrael. And it never changes, ever. There's a part of Klal Yisrael that's called Yosef, or Ephraim, which does not naturally connect to the mainstream of the Jewish people. It doesn't.
Why is that Ben Yekadu Ephraim? How can it not be?
It's very yakar, but it doesn't mean that it's mainstream. Hashem loves them, but they're not necessarily loved by everybody else. Haben Yakir Li, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking. Ephraim is very powerful, even though Ephraim doesn't look very, appetizing necessarily. Ephraim, they were the first to go into Golos. They were the first to provide leadership that went away from Shlomo HaMelech, right, in Yeravim ben Nevat. And yet, the same Ephraim provided us Yehoshua, who led us into Eretz Yisrael and gave us the Nachla. And the answer is, the potential is always there. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it goes towards Churban, which means we're not ready. All that means is that we weren't ready to take the next step.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I understand that all these are foreshadowing for events that occurred later. We learn from these things. And just as a practical approach, what does that do for us now? How can we interpret that it's very good to see, Monday morning quarterback, how do you see that?
Okay, so then what are the lessons that you apply today? Number one, there are Jews out there who you don't think have anything to offer us who may be the key to our survival. The people who may actually save our skin, right, are ones that the mainstream would probably not want to live next to or make a shidduch with. Or have their granddaughter marry. Vehem lo hikiruhu. The idea of Yosef is they looked at Yosef as a mortal enemy. They looked at Yosef as an ultimate threat, and yet he was their savior. That's what you have to keep your eye open for. There's a lot of fighting and hatred within Klal Yisrael. It's a terrible, terrible situation of fractionalism. It's always been the case. But it's particularly pronounced here in Eretz Yisrael because we're now back on center stage. We're not like a little sideshow going on in Prague and in Brooklyn and in all these other places, Moravia and Barcelona, where the real story was what was going on with the Goyim. There's a little sidebar about what was going on with the Jews. The story here is the story about the Jews and the struggles between the factions and elements of the Jewish people. Terrible struggles. What are the struggles? the struggles between ultra secular and ultra orthodox, if they call themselves that, whatever they want to call themselves. The struggles within the more nationalistic camp to the more camp that wants to withdraw itself from the world at large and focus on study of Torah and the Kollel world, to hunker down into the bunkers of Torah and not take responsibility for running the country, running a country. Big problem. But that's not a new problem. That was the same problem. Yehuda was sent, Lahoros Lefanav Goshna. Yehuda was sent by Yaakov Avinu to establish in Goshen a base Talmud. That's what the Gemara says, a yeshiva. He said, someone has to sit there and teach Torah and make sure that the children are taught Torah. And Yosef will be the one to engage with the intergovernmental affairs and to deal with Parnassa, you know what I'm saying, and all those outside things. It's always been that way. So you want to know what you can learn now? Look at what's going on and say, you know what? There's not one truth. All of this is pieces of Klal Yisrael that have a contribution to make. And what's our goal? Our ultimate goal? Put it all together. Redeem the parts that you thought to reject. You understand? There's nobody in this country who's not part of the solution, and there's nobody who's not part of the problem. Mm. Whereas some people would like to think that we're the solution, right? And there are no problems. No. Everybody's equally part of the solution and equally part of the problem. What does that mean? Because you can either use your koach to unify, or you can use your koach to create machloket and division. Which one is it going to be? And unfortunately today, it's a lot easier. Machloket is a lot easier. L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shachar v'ra. So for example, the idea of being a voice for tolerance, that they're to speak against those who put down other Jews because they're different or because they don't share the same philosophy, that has to be a much more vocal voice. It has to be much more vocal. And it also has to be, just to show concern for being Makarif people. We can't sit in our, nice little world and say we've got all the, the kashrus and the Torah and the mikvah and everything else, and to heck with everyone else. The other couple million Jews roaming around here and in the outside world. That's a practical thing. What are we doing? And people are doing amazing things, especially in our community, doing amazing things to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. If we segregate ourselves, we are part of a problem. It's not this way the story goes. If Esther wasn't willing to go into the palace and bashmutz herself for the Jewish people, we wouldn't have a Jewish people. Now, she did it on the guidance of Nevi'im, Daniel, her Rebbe, and Mordechai, her husband and her Rebbe. But boy, did she have to bashmutz herself on the lowest of the lowest levels. And